The stars are right, and that means it's time for another episode of The Whisperer in Darkness. I'm your host, the Man from Lang. Thank you very much for joining me today. On this episode, I am reviewing the Seeker cards in For the Greater Good, the third Mythos pack in the Circle Undone cycle. There are spoilers throughout if you care about that sort of thing. If you enjoy what you hear, remember to like, comment, and subscribe. With that in mind, let's get started. The first Seeker card in the pack is an upgrade for Scroll of Secrets. It's a 1-cost asset that costs 3 experience points. It has 2 intellect skill icons and the item and tome traits. It uses 3 secrets and takes up a hand slot. As an action, you may exhaust Scroll of Secrets and spend 1 secret to look at the bottom 3 cards of any investigator's deck or the encounter deck. You may discard one of those cards. You may add one of those cards to its owner's hand. Place the rest of those cards on either the top or bottom of their deck in any order. A Seeker or off-class Seeker who upgrades to Scroll of Secrets 3 gets an extra intellect skill icon and the ability to manipulate the bottom 3 cards of the encounter deck or an investigator's deck rather than just the bottom card. Scroll of Secrets 3 is a lot like a mashup of Old Book of Lore and Scrying, Seeker and Mystic assets from the core set respectively. Old Book of Lore lets you look at the top 3 cards of an investigator's deck and draw one of those cards. The other 2 get shuffled back into the deck. Scrying lets you look at the top 3 cards of either an investigator's deck or the encounter deck and then return them to the top of that deck in any order. The key difference between Scroll of Secrets 3 and those 2 cards are A, you look at the bottom 3 cards of an investigator's deck or the encounter deck, and B, you get to discard one of the cards in addition to drawing a card and reordering the others. I don't think it matters all that much if you're looking at the top 3 cards or bottom 3 cards of a deck, especially if the deck in question is sufficiently randomized, since the scroll does give you the option to stack the deck in your favor anyway. As I mentioned during my review of Scroll of Secrets 0 from the secret name, there are very few cards besides the scroll that interact with the bottom of either an investigator's deck or the encounter deck in a meaningful way, so you'll really have to think outside the box to find interesting combinations. Alyssa Graham lets you put a card on the bottom of a deck, but it does cost a doom. Wendy's Amulet lets Wendy place an event at the bottom of her deck rather than the discard pile, but manipulating that card with the scroll requires a lot of setup in multiplayer. There are a couple of weaknesses from the Forgotten Age that are placed on the bottom of an investigator's deck when they enter play, but using the scroll to deal with them is the very definition of a corner case. I do like the ability to discard a card as part of the deck manipulation effect. Removing a dangerous enemy or treachery from the encounter deck, or removing a weakness from an investigator's deck while stacking the next draw or 2 in your favor is quite good. The value of the discard depends a lot on the number of cards in the deck, other deck manipulation effects that work on it, and how quickly you expect to draw through it. But it will buy you some time at least. The biggest problem I have with Scroll of Secrets 3 is the same problem that I had with its level 0 counterpart, namely it takes an action to trigger its ability. Daisy Walker is the only Seeker who can trigger the Scroll of Secrets 3 without hurting her tempo, so if I play this card, I will likely play it in Daisy. Scroll of Secrets 3 could be decent in Daisy, especially if you're playing a build that uses both Old Book of Lore and Scrying. The upgraded scroll lets her enjoy the benefits of both worlds while saving a couple card slots in the process. Scroll of Secrets 3 is more flexible than either Old Book of Lore or Scrying. It also gives you more options to manipulate the cards that you see. The scroll does enter play with a limited number of secrets though, so if you're worried that 3 secrets won't be enough, you can play the scroll in combination with Enraptured and Truth from Fiction to generate 1 or 2 additional secrets respectively. I enjoy playing around with deck manipulation, so I will give the Scroll of Secrets 3 a try at some point. The last time I played around with encounter deck manipulation, it was out of Norman Withers. Obviously, Norman's deck building restrictions prevent him from using the Seeker version of Scroll of Secrets 3, so I'll likely play it in Daisy if I play it at all. In my experience, taking an action to manipulate a deck is a little too slow for my liking in solo, so Daisy's extra tome action is essential if you want to leverage this card in the solo format. The second Seeker card in the pack is an upgrade for Grizzly Totem. It's a 3-cost asset with willpower and agility skill icons and the item, charm, and cursed traits. It has the following game text: response: after you commit a card to a skill test, exhaust Grizzly Totem. That card gains another instance of one of its skill icons of your choice. If that skill test is successful, the performing investigator draws one card. Grizzly Totem takes up an accessory slot. I discussed the pros and cons of Grizzly Totem Zero at length during my review of the dual class cards in the Secret Name Mythos pack. Briefly, the totem's response is similar to that of Mintei Fan's, although it is more limited in scope since it works only on cards you commit to the skill test, and it duplicates a skill icon on the card rather than adding a wild skill icon. Ultimately, the totem's value depends on several factors, including the difficulty level of the campaign, the investigator's base skill values, the investigator's role in the group if you're playing multiplayer, and the number of skill icons on the card you commit. Adding skill icons seems good in theory, but an extra icon may be subject to diminishing returns, so you should pay attention to the cards you are committing in order to maximize your return from the totem. Grizzly Totem 3 is nearly identical to its level 0 counterpart. For the 3 experience, you gain an additional willpower skill icon, which is fine, albeit unspectacular, and the curse trait, which doesn't have any impact on the game at the moment. Perhaps we'll see an investigator down the road who may use cards with the curse trait, much like Father Mateo can use cards with the bless trait. The most important benefit of upgrading to the investigator is the investigator performing the skill test gets to draw a card if the skill test is successful. The ability to turn one card you commit to a skill test each turn into the equivalent of a core set skill is quite good. If you get Grizzly Totem 3 down on the table early enough, you could draw a significant number of cards during a typical 10 to 12 turn scenario. Grizzly Totem Zero hasn't seen a lot of play in Seeker decks since it was released in the Secret Name. Players have experimented with a single copy of the totem in a few different investigators, including Joe Diamond, Rex Murphy, Norman Withers, and Ursula Downs, but that's not exactly a ringing endorsement for the card. When Grizzly Totem does make the cut in Seeker, it's usually in a Mintei Fan deck. That shouldn't come as much of a surprise since the totem's response is so similar to her own. If you've been experimenting with Grizzly Totem Zero in your Mintei Fan deck, upgrading to Grizzly Totem 3 makes a lot of sense. Min needs to keep her hand flush with cards so she has a lot of options when it comes time to commit cards to skill tests. Grizzly Totem is almost like an additional copy of her signature asset, Analytical Mind, although it is important to note Min gets the extra draw only during her own skill tests, not those of other investigators if she uses the Grizzly Totem. Grizzly Totem Zero hasn't seen play in many Seeker investigators besides Mintei Fan, and I expect that will be the case with Grizzly Totem 3. I'm a little surprised by that, because I think that you can make a case for playing Grizzly Totem Zero in Joe Timon 2 to shore up his willpower and agility. The only real difference between Grizzly Totem 0 and Grizzly Totem 3 is the addition of the card draw, but you could draw a lot of cards if you get that totem down early enough during a scenario. If you're playing an investigator such as Min, who likes to keep her hand well stocked, Grizzly Totem is certainly worth a look. That's going to do it for my review of the Seeker cards in For the Greater Good. I'm not terribly excited about the Seeker cards in this Mythos pack since they seem to be very investigator specific, and I haven't played either of those investigators lately. If Scroll of Secrets 3 is going to see play, it will likely be in a Daisy Walker deck, since Daisy does get that bonus action to trigger abilities on tomes. Scroll of Secrets 3 enters play with only 3 secrets, so you'll likely want to play it in combination with Enraptured and or Truth from Fiction if you're planning to manipulate an investigator deck or the encounter deck turn after turn. The other potential problem with the card is that there are we've seen a lot of tomes released, and so competition for that tome spot in Daisy decks is becoming a little more fierce. As for Grizzly Totem 3, it will likely see play in Mintei Fan since it mimics her special ability and that of her signature asset, Analytical Mind. I'm holding out hope for either level of Grizzly Totem will find a home in other Seeker investigators too, but thus far, players haven't really been willing to commit to it. Perhaps that will change at some point down the road. That's going to do it for this review. If you enjoy what you hear, remember to like, comment, and subscribe. If you need to contact me, I can be reached at manfromlang@gmail.com. I'm also on Twitter at manfromlang. Until the stars are right, keep your shotgun close and your elder sign closer. Take care out there, and happy investigating.